Hello once again, everybody. This is Nightlife, and I'm gonna give you something new this time. Not that I'm getting bored of anything else, but I'm always reading either a very short fic or quality question Project Horizons, which is effing long, and I kind of want an in-betweener, you know, something semi-bite-sized, at least as far as chapters go. And I think I have something, and it looks like it's in the petrol-punk style. I guess it's kind of similar to steampunk, except more pistons and less gears. Or differences in. I don't know the differences. Could somebody help me out here? But it looks like there are still airships by the pick in the film fiction main page of a story. This little thing is by Raven's Dagger, and it is called "Of Steam Gears and Wings." Huh. It says steampunk. Yeah. Uh, Here's a little description. 10 years after a massive war, Equestria has changed. The Empire now rules over all, giving peace and prosperity to those who deserve it. But some are against this new rulership. The CMC, a small, raggedy group of smugglers working for the Apple family, are caught red-hoofed by an Imperial patrol. As the friends fight for their lives, they learn about themselves, each other, and the world they now reside in. Meanwhile, in Kentawat, Emperor Blueblood has amassed a massive fleet and is preparing to smash what is left of the rebellion under the oppressive hoof of his empire. Wow. It sounds like this one's gonna be a good one. Let's go right into it, shall we? The first chapter is called The Last Flight of the Crusader. It is 7,017 words. Nice sevens. Oh yeah. What? What? Are you done already? It's only 6:40. Yeah. I'm sorry. I just glanced over at the featured box, and Twilight Sparkle plays with dolls. Oh well. Ooh, this is a very nice image. There's a pic. Oh, you can see it for yourself because I should put the link in the description of this story. The image is by No Reason to Hope. Wow, that's not good. Nice little picture of Rainbow Dash manning or being stationed at the wheel. Yeah. Without any further ado, let's get to it. When Scootaloo had first seen the Crusader, she thought it was ugly, very ugly. It was short, fat, and had the oddest configuration of balloon placement she had ever seen on an airship. Unlike a normal airship, where the balloon was above the cabin, this ship's balloons were wrapped around not one, but two cabins, one above and one below. The top cabin held the sparsely decorated pilot station that doubled as a crow's nest, as well as the main engine. The bottom carriage held the main cargo, the main cargo hold, sleeping quarters. Sorry, my throat. Two small engines, and the only weight capacitor on board the ship, something indispensable to any modern airship. Separating the two cabins was a bundled mass of rusty scaffolding, ladders, and wires left to the mercy of the winds. In all, it looked like two great misshapen lumps held together by two metallic shuttles. The entire thing was painted red and blue by the inexperienced hooves of its owners. A prancing, cape-wielding yellow filly adorned its side, the symbol of the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Fucking sweet! The Crusader was ugly. It stank and its motors leaked and sputtered more than they should, but it was airworthy. And after spending such a long time on board the little ship, it had worked its charm on her. They wouldn't want it any other way. It was home. A small smile adorned her face as she leaned on the railing right below the main propeller and its rudder. She could still remember the look she and Sweeney Bill had shared when Apple Bloom had bought the ship. Ooh. Apple Bloom had taken all the money the Cutie Mark Crusaders had scrambled together and had bought it on her own. It didn't cost much at first, but they soon found out why the thing was so inexpensive. 3 months of hard work later, and it was ready. Scootaloo's thoughts were interrupted when she heard a creaking from the main rudder. Huh? We're not supposed to turn yet. Stretching her wings leisurely, she let them catch the first rays of dawn's sun, taking the time to enjoy the way they rubbed against her leather jacket as they fanned out in the soft breeze. Scootaloo turned and trotted to the balcony up the metal ladder, her hooves ringing loudly in the still dawn. She climbed into the pilot's cabin, a Spartan room with next to no furnishings. The room made up for this lack of decoration by providing a magnificent view. A white and brown colt stood at the helm, eyes closed and head low, almost touching the wooden heel. He was breathing evenly through his nose, making small whistles sounds after each breath. Scootaloo slowly snuck up to him, leaning forward until her mouth was a mere inch from his ear. "Pip, wake up! Captain Pip! Yes! Yes! Captain Pip!" I'm sorry, it's a NLR thing, I think. The white and brown colt jumped awake and looked around in a panic. "What's going on?" Pip squeaked. Yeah. I guess that's because I'm talking. Pipsqueak stared at the dozen of dials that were part of the controls, quickly making sure everything was in the ship was still working. He looked and spotted her wearing a sly grin. "Let's go," he started, but was interrupted by her laughter. "Wake up, silly. It's almost daybreak." Scootaloo giggled once more and trotted over to the pile of maps thrown about on a table at the rear of the metallic cabin. On top of the pile was a map of their whereabouts. A red line had been carefully penned in Sweetie Belle's delicate hoof writing. It went from Ponyville to New Appaloosa, wiggling and twisting at places, sometimes to avoid obstacles, sometimes to avoid patrols. Pipsqueak grunted and shook himself in an attempt to clear off the last remnants of sleep. He was a relatively new addition to the crew and was starting to get used to being treated as such. Pipsqueak was always given the hardest, most boring jobs. In this case, night flight duty. "Is anything wrong?" he asked, a note of concern and fear of failure in his voice. He glanced over at her nervously. "Oop, 1 second. Okay, here we go. My fiancée just came on, and I will still be doing the reading, but I will take periodic pause breaks." Scootaloo grabbed the map and brought it to the ship's gyro compass. She compared the two with an experienced eye, while Pipsqueak fretted behind her. "Ah, Pip, you took us off course. Turn the wheel 8 degrees to port." "What's going on?" Apple Bloom said as she opened the well-oiled floor hatch. Below her, the wind howled as it passed between the struts that connected the two gas bags together. "I heard Pip squeal." That was not... no. Oh, bad memory. Go away. Oh. The only male on board blushed when Apple Bloom made her appearance. He went back to steering the ship while paying undue amounts of attention to the clouds ahead. Scootaloo joined her friend before shutting the hatch and locking it firmly. "How is Sweetie doing?" Scootaloo lowered her voice in concern, as if her unicorn friend far below could hear through both cabins. "Not bad," Apple Bloom sighed. She was reading that letter again. The two friends shared a moment of awkward silence. Apple Bloom scratched her foreleg and looked around the inside of the cozy cabin. It wasn't meant to have this many ponies in it. "Can we go out? I need some air." "Yeah, let's go." Scootaloo nodded in understanding and led the way out through the wooden door and out onto the metallic balcony beyond, their hooves ringing and echoing into the cloudy sky as they made their way around one of the large balloons. The two mares walked sure-hoofed to the side of the ship. From there, all they could see was open sky on one side and the tarp that made up the giant gas bag to the other. The sun was just cresting the horizon as the two friends sat on the cold walkway in silence. Their breath made small clouds in the chilly morning air that were quickly lost as the ship moved forward. These were the moments they lived for. "So, how are things below?" Scootaloo broke the silence. "Not bad. I wanted to shift things around tonight. Hide our cargo behind the apple shipment. Last cargo check was a close call. We really need to find more hiding spots." Thank goodness Pipsqueak got a nasty case of poxylopus. The two friends gave a smile at the nostalgic memory. The look on the guard's face when Pipsqueak puked all over the hold. Puked all over the hold? Apple Bloom laughed. "Thank goodness you cooked that day. I almost joined him." Looks like Scoots can't cook, just like her. What's the word? Idol. That's it. Idol. Scootaloo gave her a friendly punch on the shoulder. "Hey, I never asked for the cooking duty," Scootaloo countered indignantly. "Awesome pilot does not contribute to the crew's ability." Apple Bloom responded just as indignantly. The two friends huffed and looked in opposite directions before breaking out into laughter. Their laughter died off as the wind and the whirling blades of the ship carried their words away. "So, New Appaloosa again." "New Appaloosa again." "Yep." Apple Bloom imitated her elder brother. "Don't you ever get tired of that run? Same sky, same patrols, same stuff hidden all over the ship. Hey, it doesn't even pay that much. Boring." Scootaloo leaned her head against the railing and looked Apple Bloom over. Ooh. Apple Bloom had changed a little. She was taller now. Her old bow was tattered and frayed on the edges and didn't look as large as it once had. Her entire body, Kiyomar concluded, was hidden under an oil-stained red mechanic suit. She was covered entirely in grease and grime. The Crusader wasn't equipped with a decent shower. Oh yeah, that's right. Thankfully, the usual run was only 2 days long. They could afford to stink a little. Apple Bloom sighed, breaking Scootaloo's thoughts. "Yeah, it gets boring after a while. I just wish my sis would let me join the rebellion. I'm sure we could make a difference." "Well, we are sort of helping. We smuggle stuff around." Scootaloo regretted pushing the conversation down that path. Uh-oh. "That hardly helps any pony." She stomped against the railing with an apple family kick, the metal denting slightly as the impact shook the entire railing. Neither of them worried about it much. The ship was covered in dings and dents. "Maybe we can. From what I can tell, these things aren't going. Blah. Let me try again. From what I can tell, things aren't going any better. We might have to join the rebellion soon." Scootaloo smiled hopefully. "I wish we could." Apple Bloom giggled. "You just want to be with Rainbow Dash, don't you?" "I do not." Scootaloo snorted too quickly. "You sleep with that ugly coat on, and I saw that poster in your room," said Apple Bloom with a sly smile, causing Scootaloo to blush fiercely. "Ooh. Just 'cause she's the one that gives it to you, don't..." "Oh, okay. Just 'cause she's the one to give it to you, doesn't mean you should wear it all the time." Apple Bloom started laughing at Scootaloo's discomfort. "It's alright. Secret's safe with me. And Sweetie and Pip Buck and a pipsqueak, and the whole of Ponyville. Scootaloo just groaned in embarrassment. A silence stretched over the pair once more. Scootaloo looked up at the clouds as they passed. The sun painted over the orange sky, making the usually dark clouds appear as if they were on fire. Something metallic and obviously pony-made poking through the clouds and poked through the clouds and grabbed her attention as the sunlight glinted off its shiny structure. "What's that?" She pointed her hoof to at the bar that stuck out from beneath the larger clouds. Oh, one sec. Apple Bloom rose up and stared at the object. They both squinted as it grew larger and larger. The thing was slowly gaining on them. Suddenly the clouds parted and gave them a partial view of a huge gray blimp. "Looks like trouble. Get Sweetie on the radar. I'll go warn Pipsqueak," Apple Bloom said before running off along the railings. She was soon out of sight as she went around the large gas bag. Scootaloo looked up at the bag and focused on her wings. Flying had never been her forte, but she was more than capable of flying over the balloon. In a matter of seconds, Scootaloo took off, cringing as she was buffeted by the strong winds above the ship. She flapped harder, gaining some altitude as she forced her way up. Finally, Scootaloo made it over the bag and into the crevice in between the two balloons of the airship. She avoided the tangle of wires, struts, and antennas to land on the pilot's cabin with a heavy thud, right beside one of the camouflaged roof turrets. Trotting over to the roof hatch, she bucked the rusty lever to the side and opened the doorway. As Scootaloo fell in, she was greeted by a wide-eyed Pipsqueak who was standing behind the wheel. "No, Tom. Apple Bloom will explain," she said as she opened the bottom hatch and dropped down. It wasn't a long way from one cabin to the next, but the turbulence of the air passing between the two balloons made it a perilous drop. The type of stunt that had killed more than one overconfident Pegasus. Scootaloo glided down to the roof of the much larger cabin below. She closed her eyes against the cold wind as it threw her off course, forcing her to flap furiously to land anywhere near the doorway. With a loud thud and a small yelp, Scootaloo crashed into the much larger lower cabin. She quickly inspected herself and let out a sigh of relief when she saw she was unscathed by the ropes and supports that crisscrossed between the two gas bags. Scootaloo reoriented herself and found the doorway. Using her wings as a shield against the strong winds, she crawled over to the hatch. The lower cabin was much larger. It had its own secondary piloting station as well as the cargo hold, crew quarters, and two small engines that powered the rear propellers. It also held a sparkle weight generator, the sparkle weight generator, a must for any ship. It allowed them to magically regulate the weight of the ship, letting them go up or down at will. Scootaloo grunted as she opened the heavy door, impeded by the strong winds that pushed against the large flat surface. The door creaked and forced against the turbulent wind. With one last heave, the door popped open, and Scootaloo slipped into the room as it slammed itself shut. The commotion of the door closing resonated through the metallic cabin. Sweetie Belle, who was under the impression the immense sparkle generator, twisted and turned beneath the generator, that then finally popped her grime-covered head out. "Oh, hi," she said, slightly surprised to see Scootaloo panted for air. When she saw the way Scootaloo's mane and tail were twisted and windblown, she giggled. "Yeah, hear me stutter," climbed out from behind the generator and trotted over to her friend as Scootaloo began preening her feathers back into order. "What's wrong? Do you actually try to fly here?" Sweetie Belle asked, raising her brow questioningly. Scootaloo looked away, slightly embarrassed. "Of course not. You'd have to be a fool to try and fly on an airship. It's the first rule that Pegasi shouldn't fly on board a ship unless anchored," she quoted from the manuals. Sweetie Belle just stared at her, oblivious to the fact to her friend's failed attempt to lie. Just get to the radar. I think we spotted trouble, said Scootaloo before the conversation went on. Fine. You know, we could have used a PA. Scootaloo faced to herself for forgetting the intership communication unit, intra-ship communication units. Sweetie Belle laughed at her discomfort as she walked past the orange and purple, the orange and purple Pegasus. Come on, I could use your help on the radio, and you could use a meal. Scootaloo tried to deny it, but her stomach betrayed her. Who's cooking tonight? Sweetie Belle popped her head out from around the corner with a mischievous smile. You are. Scootaloo disgruntled in disappointment and followed the unicorn. The communication station on board the Crusader was obsolete at first glance. It was tucked into the very front of the ship and only had one set of headphones and a simple console to control it. In reality, it was one of the best on the market. It had simply been camouflaged by years of use to look cheap and ugly. It was tuned specifically to hear the Imperial frequencies, something the average set couldn't and wasn't supposed to do. Sweetie Belle was the only pony on the crew that could manage the complicated magical device, something that she took a lot of pride in reminding every pony of. Sweetie Belle sat on the cold chair that was bolted to the ground and stared at the system before starting to tweak it with her magic. As quickly as she could, she turned on the radar and started scanning the skies. As the arm on the radar screen circled around, it slowly revealed a large oblong shape headed right for the Crusader. Airship, said Sweetie Belle with a hint of concern. She redoubled her efforts on the console to fine-tune its radar reading. And it's Imperial. Huh. They both swore silently. Sweetie Belle levitated out a book of nearby levitated a book out of a nearby case. Flipping through the pages, she compared the silhouettes within with the one on the screen. Crap! It's an interdiction class light destroyer. What's it doing here? They never come around these parts. Too much wind for that large ship. Pip fell asleep at the wheel. Again. Scootaloo rolled her eyes. He turned us off course, she said with a sigh. When? We stay as far as we can from their patrols. There's no way we strayed that far in a few minutes. Sometime last night. Scootaloo cringed. You never noticed? Sweetie Belle lifted her hooves in the air, exasperated. Bah, never mind. Too late for that now. Maybe they won't bug us. Huh. As if predetermined, the radio crackled to life at that very moment. Light commerce ship Crusader, bearing northwest. This is the Conformity. Shut off all engines and prepare for mid-air search party. Any and all devices on board with device deviances from orders will result in immediate termination of the crew by orders of the Great Emperor Blueblood. Holy shit. Please confirm. The two mares gulped. I guess they won't just leave us alone. Scootaloo turned to Sweetie Belle. Now what? If they check our cargo... Apple Bloom, it's the Imperials. They want to search the Crusader. Wait, Sweetie Belle... Sorry. Bleh. Sweetie Belle grabbed the intra communications unit. Sweetie Belle grabbed the intra-ship communications unit. Apple Bloom, it's the Imperials. They want to search the Crusader. A few crackles later, and a familiar voice responded, Yeah, I can see it now. It's huge. What should we do? The three waited in silence. We outrun them, said Scootaloo. Sweetie Belle rolled her eyes. That's your solution for everything. Fly away, responded Apple Bloom from above with a crackle. No, hear me out. Scootaloo ripped the thick book from Sweetie Belle's hooves and turned back to the page she was on. Look, it says here the interdiction class has a top speed of 45 knots. She slapped the page. Pipsqueak, what's our top speed? About 30 with only the main prop, 50 with the two secondaries. I can get it to go faster if we need it, but I'll need to be down there, interrupted Apple Bloom. Might end up using some of our special cargo. If you don't mind me adding, said Pipsqueak, their cannons kind of fire faster than we can run. I don't think I can avoid them forever. We have guns too, Pipsqueak. You can take care of those, said Scootaloo. Scootaloo tried to put as much of confidence as she could into her voice. Despite the huge lump in her throat, she had no qualms about smuggling under the Empire's nose, but fighting against them head-on with such bad odds. Good, then that's what we'll do, said Sweetie Belle. I'll head up top and pilot for a while. She turned to Scootaloo and raised a brow. And what about you? She asked. I'll distract them, Scootaloo said. Scootaloo smiled and puffed out her chest. Oh shit. We're all going to die, aren't we? Asked the distraught Pipsqueak, his anxiety visible even through the static of the communications unit. Scootaloo ignored him as she abandoned Sweetie Belle, who began to head up top and gallop through the ship, heading for the cargo hold. To any pony else, it was a simple metal hold filled with dozens of crates containing fresh Sweet Apple Acres apples. To them, it was a room filled with jars of highly illegal Zap Apple fuel. Scootaloo flew over the crates and towards the wall at the back at the back of the small room. She quickly landed and started tapping the wall until it sounded hollow. Bucking lightly against the wall, the entire section fell off, revealing a ladder leading down. She hopped down the ladder, and stood out the bottom of the ship, cringing against the cold air that battered her against the metal ladder. There, amongst the tangles of ropes and wires, was the Expedite. The Expedite's small frame was clear against the sharp relief cast by the bright white clouds below. The single-seat Mosquito-class freighter was shaped like a bullet and was only covered by thin plates of armor. It had a single small cabin at the top and front of its engine. Two deployable canvas wings adorned each side of the small fighter craft. Because of its shape and lack of gas bags, it depended on its massive thrust, speed, and stubby wings to stay afloat. At the fore were two long, protruding pinky party cannons that fired in successive bursts, weapons not usually found on such a small vehicle. It looked just like the insect was named for, down to the 6 small deployable legs. She loved every inch of it. Oh my gosh. Scootaloo admired the cobbled-together craft with a small smile. It had been given to her by her idol. Ever since she had received it, she spent days and weeks lovingly caring for this small vehicle, with the aid of Apple Bloom's mechanical expertise. Not a single original piece remained on it. They had all been replaced with aftermarket and sometimes illegal parts. Carefully opening the cockpit, she dropped onto the seat and strapped herself into the harness. She lovingly tapped the console before flicking on the radio. The radio crackled to life as she prepared herself for launch. Here, I don't think they saw it. You know the imps. They're not exactly experts at spotting that sort of thing. Scootaloo recognized the voice as Sweetie Belle's. All right, guys, I'm ready down here, she said, brimming with confidence as she finished her pre-flight checks. All right then, said Apple Bloom, her voice distorted by the bad signal. I'm in the engine room. Sweetie's is at the controls. Scootaloo scanned further along the ship, and through the tangled ropes, chains, and wires, she spotted the domed gunning station camouflaged as one of the viewports used on the landing. It slid open and a gun floated out, wrapped in a purple shell of magic, fixing itself to a bracket on the swivel-mounted glass dome. Ready! shouted Apple Bloom. All right then, Sweetie Belle. When we are under the ship, give her full gas. I'll prop out and fly in the opposite direction. Let's just hope they follow me, not the Crusader. Scootaloo placed her hooves on the controls and waited for the signal. You sure you can outrun them? Positive. A minute, then 2, went by as the ship slowly shifted and moved under the larger Imperial ship above. Scootaloo anxiously followed the progress of the two ships using their shadows on the clouds. Their ship's shadow was dwarfed by the interdiction class ship. Interdiction class. She gulped. Got a ping from the imp ship. I'll catch you guys in. said Applebloom. How in the hell does this thing work? Sweebo sighed over the radio. Hit conference. Oh. Oh. The radio crackled again, then became clear. A strong male voice boomed out over the Expedite's tin can speakers. Transport ship Crusader, this is the Conformity. We are above you and ready to prepare docking maneuvers. Shut down all engines but the sparkle generators on put all sparkle generators on neutral. Gun it, sweetie! The Crusader lurched suddenly and pulled off in front of the shadow cast by the conformities above. The lower engines roared to life and sputtered two dark billowing clouds into the sky as the propellers started spinning. Skulu jammed her hoof on the engine's start button. Expedite's signal sputtered. Its tri-blade propellers turned once, twice, then sputtered into a stall. Skulu cursed as she looked around in panic, trying to find the source of the problem. She spotted something shiny on the floor and picked it up. A wrench with a tiny engraving on its side. Skulu stared at it until her mind put two and two together. Applebloom, remember that tune-up you were supposed to do on the Expedite? Oops. Not cool. I need to get out there. Skulu slammed her hoof against the ship's small communications unit. It's nothing too incredible. You'll just need to cold start the motor. Could you get to the Crusader? I'll hoof over some zap apple fuel. Then I'll kick into high gear for a while. Skulu swore and untied herself from the harness. She popped open the cabin door, flung the wrench still held in her hooves into the sky, and angrily made her way under the hatch to the underhatch of the Crusader, fighting the rough winds as she did so. She twisted the rusty hatch and saw Applebloom's smiling face. Here! The earth pony disappeared for a few seconds, then reappeared with 2 jars of the precious liquid. Skulu bit into both jars, slobbering on them in the process. Ew. Applebloom smiled at her and started to back away when suddenly the Crusader lurched violently. Her friend tipped over suddenly, moving as if in slow motion towards the gaping opening that led only to the ground far below. Skulu, acting on reflex, spun around in midair and bucked her friend back into the cargo hold. Applebloom landed with a loud thump inside. Sorry, she said through a mouthful of jars. The Pegasus quickly made her way back to her fighter, knowing that Applebloom would give her hay later. She fumbled with the gas tank's cap with her hooves, popping it open with a small release of pressure. She peered into the dark fuel container and, wasting no time, emptied an entire jar of zap apple fluid into it. Zap apple fuel into it. Skulu smirked through her filled mouth and hopped back into the ship. Alright, I'm back, she screamed into the radio after having dumped the remaining jar behind her seat. She sighed, relieved to be able to help once. Blech! She sighed, relieved to be able to help once more. Applebloom grunted over the radio. I just hope he didn't empty it all in there. It'll take a week to clean out the boiler. I'd never do that, lied Skulu as she tried once more to fire up her ship's engine. The prop spun again and again, then sputtered into a stall. White fumes puffed out of the engine compartment and were carried away by the breeze. What the hey? Why won't it start? She hit the dashboard in frustration. Sound of gunfire and mechanical movement swarmed over the radio. Oodaloo? You'll have to spin the prop while pulling the ignition. The line screeched and went dead, leaving her alone in the cold, silent cabin. One second. She simply stared at the communications unit, wide-eyed for a few seconds, as the Crusader shook again, this time much more violently. The stress of not being able to help was beginning to wear her out. Her friends were right above her, fighting for their lives, while she was useless, stuck in the cabin of a ship that wouldn't start. Crap, crap, crap! Stupid Imperials, stupid Expedite! Twisting her teary eyes her teary-eyed head around in the cabin. She looked at the tri-blade prop at the very back of the plane. The ignition was near the center of the dashboard, amongst dozens of dials and meters. How was she going to press the button and turn the prop? Before she found an answer to her own question, the Crusader shook. From the corner of her eye, she saw mangled parts of the ship's outer balcony fall through the sky. She was standing on the balcony minutes earlier. Something clicked inside her. This is going to suck. She did something that was forbidden in every flight manual in Equestria. She released the ship without powering up the engine. The heavy clamps on the underside of on the underbelly of the Crusader disengaged, and the expedite dropped nose first through the clouds. Rolling water-filled clouds obscured her vision. Scudlu felt herself lift and be pressed into the back of her seat by the force of the falling aircraft. She reached out a hoof and pressed to start. It was too short. "Come on!" she yelled through clenched teeth. Using her wings as a prop, she pushed herself away from the seat and towards the control panel. The very tip of her hoof pressed against the ignition, and slowly the button sunk in. The vehicle forced itself to life. Behind her, a large plume of multi-hued smoke sputtered out of the engine, and the blade started to twirl. With a thump, she crashed back into the seat and let out a relieved sigh. Scudlu grabbed the throttle in one hoof and the controls in the other. She pulled back with all her strength. Not too far below, the yellow expanse of the Appalachian desert stretched out in every direction. Small details of the desert became clearer and clearer as the ship hurtled towards the ground at lightning speeds. "Am I going to die?" she asked herself. Slowly, with the sheer force of will, Scudlu pulled back on the yoke, forcing the ship to bend under the pressure of the fall. The desert grew larger and larger until finally the ship righted itself, mere meters from the hard, sandy ground. Thick plumes of sand were tossed in the air as the expedite flew by. "I love you," she said as she affectionately stroked the controls of her craft. Grease monkey. She grinned and pulled back on the yoke and pointed the nose of her craft back into the clouds, feeling the elation she always got piloting a ship in a dangerous atmosphere. The engine responded to her commands with a rumbled muttering as it spewed rainbow-colored smoke. When she finally pierced through the clouds once more, it only took her seconds to spot the Crusader. The bright red ship was turning sharply below the Imperial patrol craft. The confident grin that adorned her face slowly slipped as she caught sight of the Imperial ship above. It was easily 4 times longer than the Crusader. It had only one long oblong balloon covered in a web of intricately placed metal beams that served both as a skeleton and shield to the ship. On its back tarp was a gold and gray compass rose, the insignia of the Imperial Navy. The undercarriage of the Conformity stretched from the fore to the bow, forming a sharp wedge at the front of the ship. On each side of the carriage were 6 engines that billowed dark smoke into the cloudy air, hiding the gray ship in its own thick cloud of soot. The ship had well over a dozen guns stationed on it, all twisting and shifting in an attempt to track the much more agile Crusader, as it weaved and spun, avoiding most of the slow-moving Imperial shells. The Crusader was already damaged, though. One of the small bottom engines was burning, and an entire section of its railings was missing, having taken the blow that would have otherwise pierced a gas bag. On the top of the ship were 2 long metallic bars, on which sat 2 planes Scudlu recognized as Crusader-class fighter-interceptors. They were not strong fighters, but they made up the bulk of the Imperial fighter force. Scudlu started to sweat in her seat. This was not what she expected to fight. Was this what Rainbow meant about the beauty of battle? "Scoot, where are you?" screamed Apple Bloom from the communications unit. "I'm here. Where do you need me?" she asked, sounding more confident than she felt. The expedite flew towards the 2 twisting ships above. The Crusader was twisting and turning in a desperate attempt to avoid the continuous barrage of fire from the Conformity. "Just get him off us!" "Give me 10 seconds." Scudlu pushed the throttle up until it could go no further and felt herself being pushed back into her seat. The huge Imperial ship became larger and larger as she approached. She could see the tiny shapes of ponies running inside the ship through the windows that dotted the carriage. Bang! Bang! The unmistakable sounds of the main guns firing rang through the air. Seconds later, Scudlu spotted shells the shells speeding towards the Crusader, leaving vaporous trails in their wake. The heavy rounds missed the ship by a mere hoof lengths. She sighed in relief, then furrowed her brows in realization. They wanted to kill her friends. Those shots were not warnings. This was real. Why? She asked herself. Smuggling was a crime. There was evasion. But to go as far as to try and kill them. Skulu's mind drew a blank. This was insane. She gulped and squeezed her eyes shut, trying to regain her determination. She clasped her hooves over the trigger on the yoke. The expedite shook violently as its twin cannons fired a burst point blank into the fore of the much larger ship. She popped an eye open and quickly pulled back on the yoke. The Imperial ship's whole reddened flank was incredibly close. Skulu smiled grimly as she entered the cloud of soot that billowed around the Imperial craft. From the corner of her eye, she saw both of the fighter biplanes launch from their ramps. One, then another. The pair of planes realigned themselves and turned towards her. Her smile faded. The two planes were twin-seaters, equipped with a powerful rear-mounted turret, but with a weak front-firing gun. She couldn't afford to get behind any of them lest she face those machine guns. Sulu pulled the plane into a tight loop, cringing as her body pushed into the harness, and faced the gigantic ship once more. The turrets were changing their trajectory to aim at her. She laughed as a single tear rolled down her face. At least her friends would be safe. Skulu fired another burst into the ship, and was satisfied to see a small tear appear on its tarp. Her attention was stolen as tracers flew past the nose of her fighter. The two biplanes were rushing towards her, guns blazing as they attempted to get a fix on her little plane. "Damn it, leave me alone!" She applied some rudder and shifted the nose of her plane until it faced one of the biplanes head-on. Both aircrafts fired at each other. Skulu flinched but kept pulling the trigger as bullets dinged off the weak armor that adorned her craft. It couldn't take much of this. With a satisfying boom, the Inquisitor's fuel tank caught fire. The resulting explosion sent the flaming body of the ship in one direction, while what was left of its wings spun crazily towards the ground below. She stared at the plane that she had gunned down, realizing she had just killed a pony. This was far from glorious. She glanced to the side and took in the image of the other plane shifting towards her as the Crusader in the background was still narrowly avoiding the shells fired by the Conformity. A few random ponies were worth the lives of her friends. The lives of her friends. "One down, one to go," she whispered as she flew through the clouds and debris and flames left by the downed craft. Bullets flew by as the Imperial airship fired at her. "Crap!" Skulu spun her ship into another loop and began twisting in an attempt to avoid the Imperial shells. Suddenly, the Conformity stopped firing at her. With a loud series of pops, a dozen holes appeared on Expedite's right wing, sending the plane into a corkscrew spin. Skulu fought to regain control of the twisting ship. Her body banged against the hard sides of the cockpit. With lots of swearing, pulling, and sweating, she finally righted herself and started looking around in panic. "Come on, where are you?" she screamed, frustrated. If she messed up, her friends were going to pay for it with their lives. She twisted from side to side in the harness as she quickly became desperate. From the corner of her eye, she saw a small gray patch flying above a cloud. The other Inquisitor was flying above her. "Found ya!" Skulu pulled up and joined the other plane within the clouds, narrowly avoiding a deadly stream of bullets as she poked through. She immediately tried to twist and turn to aim at the biplane as its pilot countered her every move. The two planes spun and twisted in the air. The Inquisitor's lack of speed was compensated by its agility and the pilot's skill. The Skulu swore as she felt and heard the wings of her plane forced against the pressure of the sudden turns. Below her, she spotted the Crusader. It was still attempting to flee the Imperial ship. "Crap!" she swore again, imagining Sweetie Belle drilling her for using such foul language. "Oh, shut it. I've got no time for this." The Conformity was still hot on the Crusader's tail. just as the Inquisitor was on hers. She hit the communications unit. Guys, I need your help. She started to hatch a desperate plan. Don't know if you noticed, but we're in a pickle here too, answered Sweetie Belle. Just listen to me. If I can shake this guy off my tail, I'll do a flyby of the. I can't shake this. Listen to me. I can't shake this guy off my tail. I'll do a flyby of the Crusader. Use the belly gun to distract him. She heard Applebloom sigh across the unit. Fine, I'll try. Scootaloo gave up the dogfight and flew over top the Crusader. She retracted the Expedite's wings with a crunch, and her ship dropped like a rock. The enemy plane flipped over and followed her down, firing all the way down. She jammed her hooves on the rudder control to avoid the streams of bullets from above. With a loud whoosh, she flew right by the Crusader, glancing at her home as it whizzed by in a fraction of a second. Scootaloo jerked back the wing controls and expanded them, sending a silent prayer to Luna that the damaged wing would hold. It cracked and protested, but held firm as her ship lurched and suddenly caught the wind, rocketing her forward and under the protection of the Crusader. As the Expedite passed underneath the Crusader, she saw the bottom-mounted turret move and position itself to aim right behind her. She smiled and saluted at it, knowing that Applebloom was inside the small gun turret. Was unlikely to spot her. Applebloom's turret fired just as the remaining Inquisitor appeared. The powerful machine guns boomed as they ripped the small aircraft apart, sending its flaming remains hurtling to the desert ground below. Scootaloo cheered loudly into the microphone. "Scoot, it's catching up!" Screamed Sweetie Belle with desperation in her voice, evident even through the fizz and crackle of the radio. "What? But that's impossible!" Scootaloo skimmed around the Crusader, her mouth gaping open at what she saw. The Conformity's nose had pointed downward, directly at the Crusader. Its sharp blades cut through the wind as its downward momentum gave it speed. Most impressive was the fumes coming from the engine, no longer dark and sooty, but now puffy, rainbow-colored smoke. Zavapple fuel, she whispered, horrified. The gigantic ship chugged towards the Crusader, with no sign of turning or changing course. Well, what is it doing? At that speed, it's gonna ram you! She screamed. With a loud, sickening crunch, the Conformity's sharp nose sliced through the Crusader. Scootaloo watched, speechless and amazed, as the ship she called home was bisected by the powerful Imperial airship. The pilot's cabin and cargo hold each held on to one of the balloons. What was one ship turned into two under the force of the Imperial destroyer. Parts of the scaffolding and what was left of the railing flew into every direction, spreading out below. Scootaloo, horrified, simply stared at her home becoming wreckage. She saw a white pony she recognized as Pipsqueak fall from the pilot's cabin. His small white body was contrasting sharply against the bright red balloon that he crashed into. The quickly deflating balloons still barely hung into the cargo hold. It twisted and turned. Pipsqueak flung his hooves around desperately for a hold. His hoof wrapped around a loose cord, swinging him around as he hung on for dear life. She lost sight of the Crusader and of Pipsqueak as the ship sank below the clouds in a trail of dark smoke. Scootaloo looked up through teary, shock-filled eyes to see what was left of the Crusader being harpooned by the Conformity. The Conformity's cargo bay was open, and dozens of ponies were firing harpoon guns into the remaining balloons, which still held on to the pilot's cabin. As they reeled it in, the cabin shook and bounced, finally ramming the Imperial's cargo bay door. Within seconds, it was tied down near the belly of the Conformity, and was swarmed by Pegasi wearing gray uniforms of the Imperial Navy. Through her tears and sobs, Scootaloo heard a crackle from the radio. "Run, Scoot! Run!" She looked back at the ship in time to see the Imperial Pegasi tackle her friend through the windows of the Crusader's cabin. Scootaloo stared at her controls. What should I do? The thought of slowly and sluggishly made its way to her mind that her friend was either dead, that her friends were either dead or captured. Tears streamed down her face, blinding her, but she was unable to muster the strength to wipe them away. Acting purely on instinct, she did what she did best. She ran. Oh, man, Scoots. Behind her, what was left of the Crusader was unceremoniously dumped out of the Imperial ship, as if to give one last act of revenge. Parts of its quickly deflating balloon whipped around and rammed into the side of the ship, dinging its killer and shaking the entire Imperial craft. The Crusader slowly waved and trembled as it flew one last time through the beautiful equestrian skies, now devoid of its precious occupants. Author's note: special thank you to. That is a long ass line of squares that my computer cannot render. Dang. Okay, for the valuable tips, the Wattsman and Cheesy Pony for the incredible editing, and the Closet Brony for letting me flood him with stupid ideas. Also Jeff's for helping me iron out the last little wrinkles. And I must not forget the salt block, saltblock.blogspot.com. Fuck Scoots. Alright, so this was chapter 1 of Steam, Gears, and Wings. The Last Flight of the Crusader by Raven's Dagger. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll be getting to chapter 2 shortly, and I'll be updating the rest of my stories I'm reading tomorrow. Alonzi.